Thanks for joining me, Russell. Welcome to Dead Hand Radio.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to hang out with you here.
All right. So we first met on Facebook, I believe. I think I saw you post. You know what? I think it was your graduation from Paul Smith's remote viewing course when I saw you. How long ago was that?
Oh, that would have been 3 or 4 weeks ago
Oh, okay.
when um, we first really started talking was when I had sent to you in private message the underground base presentation.
Yeah, that, and we'll definitely get into that later on. I've got uh, some questions about that, but we met on Facebook, and we both share an
Yes,
interest in remote viewing UFOs, and that led to us talking to each other and agreeing to do a podcast episode for Dead Hand Radio.
hmm
So thank you for being here. Now, I would like to get a little bit of history about your experiences and what led you to exploring the topic of remote viewing. Could you talk about the early days when you first started to have some experiences?
sure. The first major experience I had when I was 4, I had no context, whatsoever for that particular event. Ongoing throughout my childhood, specifically through the ages of like 7 to 11, I had all kinds of very unpleasant encounters, if you will, perceptions of beings, entities, what have you, around me. From there, at 13 years old, I really started with full dedication, just like aching to know some answer. Just what is going on? How did I get here? Where am I going? Where's the instruction manual? And at that point, it's really been a chain of absorption, immersion into various experiences, practices, meditation, Buddhism, fundamental Christianity, all in a stream. In about 2010, I had come across remote viewing as a term on a website and wondered what the heck that was. So I clicked on the little banner ad and started reading the controlled remote viewing manual, which for me as ex Air Force, which you understand, uh, how could a government manual be talking about things like the Matrix? And it just blew my mind. My tech manuals were, 4 pages on how to screw a bolt onto a C-130. So I got fascinated. I, at that time, contacted Paul Smith, and he had a schedule where he was very booked up, and there was a waiting list to get into his classes. I'm not necessarily known for my patience, so I kept searching and found a training, 2-day training with Ed Dames live in Sparks, Nevada. So I went down, trained with Dames. After that, came home, trained with his DVD set, and then his master's series. My personal success was disappointing to me. However, the people around me that were also doing it really did some spectacular work, which was convincing enough for me to at least continue with the study. So I stopped doing session work and just study, study, study. A little over 3 years ago, it occurred to me, just like out of the blue, get trained again. So I called Paul. This time I was able to get into his basic course, completed the 5.5 day classroom requirements, the 10 post class sessions, was accepted into intermediate, 5.5 days, 10 more homeworks, and then made it into advanced with also then 10 more homeworks. in the interim between those classes, I also took his 1-day sketching class and then his 5-day operational class. So coming up to present, um, it's a dream come true. I completed a goal. I have discovered so many things. It's hard to even put it into context. And that pretty much puts us here in the present.
Great. Now, I just noticed we do have some live viewers,
Oh, great.
and so if anybody is interested in asking some questions to Russell, feel free to put them in the chat window there. Um, so you mentioned some entities when you were just getting started, when you were a little
Hmm.
guy. Um, can you describe what that was, what that experience was like, or
Sure.
was it multiple experiences?
Yes. The first one, and I always give the disclaimer, I do not blame anybody for, throwing this story out or doubting it. All I can tell you is an incredibly accurate, fully conscious memory of a particular event that took place in 1965 on Christmas Eve. I was 4 years old. My mother was a single mother, and we were spending Christmas together, and we stayed at my grandparents'. Sometime during the middle of the night, I was sleeping next to her in a bed, and I looked diagonal across the room, and there was a wall and then a stairway. So I saw a shadow just growing on the wall. And I sat there and stared, wide awake. Right now, I could tell you the color of the walls, the curtains, everything. And then this little being turned the corner, and it was what I know now in retrospect as what people typically call a small gray, standing there, plain as day, crystal clear, with me staring at it and it staring at me. So it moved over to the bed and grabbed the bedspread and pulled it off of me. At that point, I went into terror and was trying to muster a voice. So I'm screaming silently 3, 4, 5 times, trying to say mom. Finally got it out, mom. And so she woke up, sat up, saw it. She screamed. And then the thing went back to the door. And I always have a hard time describing it. So fast, just like, whoop. And by the time it got to the door frame, it almost had like what I would describe as a vanishing point. And it went, and that was that. And I say physical because it cast a shadow. So I had heard some sounds which caught my attention. I was still awake, at 4 years old, hoping to see Santa or whatever. So I hadn't even gone to sleep. And when I heard the sounds, I looked over and that whole event occurred. How that was always characterized by me was I just referred to it for my whole life as skeleton boy. I had no context for an alien. I believe at that point, I don't even know if in my own home we had gotten a TV. I think we got our first 13-inch black and white TV when I was 6 or 7. So when I saw the book Communion that I believe came out in 1989 and saw the cover of that book, I just like a whole body jolt seeing that same little face. I spent a lot of time just denying it from there, but yes, so that was the first event.
And has this have these experiences been with you your whole life, or did they go through spurts and starts, or was it just a couple of times when you were younger and then it stopped?
The most brutal phase was, like I say, from 7 to maybe 11 years old, where at one point I was taken to the child psychologist because of what they called night terrors. Of course, then it was a good fortune that drugs weren't thrown at you. They just assumed I had some sort of problem and needed to work it out. And no, I'm not lacking problems, but that wasn't one of them. So those times, going to bed every night, terrified of what was going to come, realizing nobody believed me. I just came up with my own little, protection system. I had set up this little coat hanger or coat rack, just a piece of wood with little prongs off it, and then a horse's head, kind of like a, broomstick pony. So I would hang clothes on it and then put a hat on it and put it at the corner of my bed between myself and the door. And then to myself in my head, when these things would start to happen, I would sing the Mickey Mouse song, to comfort myself. Go through whatever experience, very few of which I have any specific memory. Then other unusual events occurred more towards adulthood, but I was really in a state of denial, didn't care to know what it was, bad dream, however you want to put it off. Eventually, I started doing some memory work in this area. But the next conscious event was in 2010, actually shortly after I returned from Sparks, Nevada, and had two witnessed events. In other words, a friend who was there with me also was aware of what happened. One left actual physical marks that I had photographed. And when you go and search certain keywords related to those marks on the internet, now you can find 20 or 30 different people with the exact same marks, mostly in the exact same place in their body. So for me, that made it pretty objective. And then I had one final one where I woke up and the best description was interrupted it. Since then, I don't believe that I have. The memory work that I just referred to, there were two more adult incidents that came forward that I remembered.
Would you categorize these as abductions or contact?
The physical one, that's completely undeniable. There was no abduction. That little guy took off. The block of ones that I don't remember, I honestly can't tell you. I don't know. The adult one that left physical, tangible markings, that I would have to say, could possibly be an abduction. I understand the complications in the phenomena. Are abductions physical, or are they, energetic or even astral experiences? So qualifying those things isn't as important to me as what the results I've had in my life.
Was there any communication that took place between you and the entities, whether it be telepathically or verbally,
No,
auditory? You didn't hear,
no, I
you didn't hear
never,
or like sense any type of
no,
message.
again, not that I recall. The one that I recalled as a memory, and it was there, again, there's no way to explain to somebody who doesn't consider this real how real even the memory aspect was. It came back as I was working through it with the physical sensations that were going on in real time, to the point maybe the discomfort or whatever it was 40% of maybe what it would have been in actual time. The emotions. So I was in a situation, very classic, table, mouth pinned open. Uh, in this case, it was a tall gray leaning over doing something, and then that little light. And what was interesting was, after going through the memory a couple times till bits and pieces surfaced and it kind of assembled itself, uh, when I had a perception position away from my body, so I could literally see my body from up and behind the uh, tall gray. And I remember actually laughing in the session. And I said, well, no wonder people don't like going to the dentist. It was literally mouth pinned open, somebody messing with your face, and that little, light, very much like the dentist. So that was an interesting encounter.
Yeah, frightening, terrifying, and I can understand why the brain would shut that memory off. But you recalled it during some memory work. Is that when the memory came back to you?
Correct. And we were not even working on or addressing the topic of aliens abduction. That had nothing to do with it. It was just like poof. And I'm looking at, my mental screen and going, what the heck is this? And the topic actually was a phrase that came up in an interview. And when the phrase came up, it had a lot of emotion. It was, I want out.
Hmm.
So by looking at the various times in my life where I want out was an issue, like a claustrophobic incident where some kids had locked me in a basement and things like this. Eventually, working through that phrase, I came to that incident, which was that I can't even tell you how big of a surprise it was to myself.
Hmm. Let's jump to the period of your life where you served in the military. What years was that?
I joined March 13th of 1980 and left, I believe it was December 12th of 1985.
Okay. During that time, were you still experiencing these weird occurrences?
I had a couple. There was a general history theme, if you will, of me being aware of things and then not wanting to be aware of them and then shutting it down. There was an incident in the Air Force that I'll mention because that it was substantiated. We one night were assigned to go out to a C-130 and configure troop seats, and this was at Mildenhall Royal Air Force Base. We were at what was known as Hard Stand 27. And we had heard stories back in the 60s, I believe. A young man had some problems back home, was refused leave, and wanted to get back home. So he posed as a captain, boarded a plane, was able to take it off, and then was lost in the English Channel. So people, we heard these stories. So there's two of us out there, and that was another interesting policy. The base itself wouldn't let anybody be alone on an aircraft that was parked on that hard stand. So two of us were out there working, and then a third guy was dropped off to help us. And the third guy came on the aircraft. I was back towards the cargo ramp, and he screamed out, "Ha ha! If you're here, ghost or whatever he said. I think he said ghoul. Then make yourself known." And within a millisecond of him saying that, that aircraft got icy cold, like if you were 100 feet underwater. And my eyes opened, and then all of a sudden, the whole aircraft went black. And then the power unit outside started going into a very bizarre cycle. Normally, when it goes down, there's a cutoff point, like a fuse, where it doesn't power back up so you don't have electronic fluctuations. But all of a sudden, the lights were going on and off. So I made it from the back of the cargo compartment, past those other two guys, out the front door, dove out on to the asphalt ramp, ripped up my knees and my uniform, my hands, and I just started running.
Yeah.
So we were then later picked up by one of the flight line crew trucks, told them what happened. They're like, okay. So they took us and got on the radio, did some things. Then they took us back to the hard stand. And so this was probably 3 a.m. And out came a staff car with a very grouchy, sleepy looking lieutenant colonel who opened up a briefcase full of reports filed and made us each fill out, sign, swear to the truth about our event, and then disappeared. And that was the last we ever heard of it.
Hmm. It's interesting. So was this related to the paranormal activity that you experienced, or was
Well,
that a
it's
different
just an outstanding
encounter?
story with some verification.
Oh, okay.
many years later, in fact, it was in the 96 or 7. I wonder if anybody has ever put anything on the internet about it. And sure enough, this guy's children had started some sort of a conversation to hear stories about their dad. And I got involved in that. And there were multiple stories similar to mine. Then there were stories, about guys that worked with their dad or knew their dad and said nice things about him. So with all of that put together, that's an event that has something behind it.
So it seems that that event was somehow related to this airman losing his life over the channel, the English Channel.
Yeah, he took off from that hard stand, or what
Mhm.
amounts to an aircraft parking area.
Wow. Oh, um, so the in so a lot of the people that I talk to that have had abduction or contact experiences
Hmm.
also demonstrate some type of psychic abilities. Do you feel, or have you ever had any experiences with psychic, other than remote viewing? I mean, um, precognitive abilities or anything like that?
Yeah, I don't know that I would call them abilities. And even having done research on the connection between abduction and ability, I personally don't see any link. If there were a link there, I have no problem with seeing it. I just don't see it. So, in terms of spontaneous, uncontrolled psychic perceptions, yes, I've had quite a few. As I stated, my immediate response was to shut it off. It just, for one reason or another, I just didn't want to have that kind of weird stuff going on. So, as one example of one that's very interesting and also supported by other people. We had, when I worked for the Seattle Fire Department in Seattle, the firefighters respond to emergency medical in the same way that they do like an actual structure fire. So we had been called to a ongoing CPR event. When we got there, there was family members, and one had provided the do not resuscitate orders, but one of the other relatives like, no, save him, save him. So as EMTs, we don't have the authority to make the decisions paramedics and ultimately the doctors make. So we're required at that point to initiate the CPR. So I'm doing CPR, which is a horrible process. I mean, you can feel ribs cracking and you hear sound. It's not like it is on TV. And all of a sudden, I just felt like this wind passed through me, and I'm doing CPR, and suddenly somehow I could see behind me, and I could still see it. It's a yellow wall with a long table, some books, lamp, little plant, and I had an impression of this guy hovering behind me, and he was radiating understanding. He was like, "It's okay. Do what you have to do. I'm fine." And like he was reassuring me to just carry on with the appearance of trying to save him. And so paramedics finally came, and they were legally able to call the man deceased. And then when we got back to the station, once in a while, we'd talk about things, and someone said, "Did anybody else feel anything weird there?" And I was kind of like, "Yeah." Now, nobody had the exact perception that I had, but they felt this sudden change of the, distress of pounding on a body and using a bag valve mask to put some oxygen there, and then a sudden change of peace, relaxation. It's okay. So that would be one good example.
Yeah, that's a pretty good example. Uh, but and you said that you have had other experiences where that has started, but you shut it off, so that it didn't really get.
Yeah, there was one in particular. One night where I had worked very hard to get hired with the Seattle Fire Department. I failed the testing the first year. The second year, I got hired, and I was just into a week or two of recruit school. And recruit school is designed to be very difficult and exhausting, and I was in that state. In the middle of the night, my cat flipped out and like clawed into me, leaped off of me, literally ripped areas of my skin open, went over the couch, ran back to this little storage area, crashed through stuff all the way back. And, in the end, it took me like 2 days to get the cat out of there. But after the cat did that, I was like, I sat up, and right at the end of, I had like a sectional that I just slept on. It was a small apartment. And there was a figure apparition there of what appeared to be a teenage boy who was appeared very injured, something that I would equate to like a car accident. And I decided right then, I'm too tired. I don't want to see this. I don't want this in my life. There's nothing I can do. The only theory that I came up with later was I was also where I was living, I was a volunteer firefighter before I'd been hired professionally. And that maybe something about me being an EMT or having helped kids in crashes. Now, I'd never been on an actual incident at that point that involved, someone of his profile. So it's not like I was followed or anything, but maybe, he just somehow perceived, oh, this guy can help me. So in kind of a harsh way, that I regretted later, I was like, no, get out of here. Don't just go. And the whole thing kind of subsided. I went back to sleep and pressed on.
Hmm. Yeah, if I don't really quite understand how the people who are able to see and talk to ghosts. That may be a politically incorrect term. I'm sorry if it is, but the people that have the ability to see and talk to ghosts, um, it's just curious to me how the ghosts know that those people are capable of communicating with them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I,
like this like for an example, this one spirit of this boy that came to you, uh, like you said, maybe it was somebody you'd come in contact with, but you never had a direct contact with anybody living.
right.
So that was obviously a spirit that somehow found you and tried to contact you. What do you have any idea how that went?
I don't. It could have been that maybe he would have tried and tried and tried, and I didn't see him. It
Mm,
might have just been the whatever, you know, vibration a helper or an EMT persona puts out. Like maybe they just look around, I need help, and they're drawn to some source. I know some people who are very competent at mediumship, and I don't question them. So do these beings come to them somehow knowing they can see? Or, I mean, it could be, does a being that they helped go out and tell the other beings, hey, this person can see us?
yeah.
So I loved that. Oh goodness, that show with Jennifer Love Hewitt, Ghost Whisperer,
Oh, I never seen that.
where
Never heard of
she
it.
would have ghosts come to her, almost always inconveniently to her life. And as she helped them come to grips with what happened to them or resolve whatever it was that was troubling them, like if they started out the episode very beat up, towards the end, all their wounds were healed, they looked different, and then
Mm,
off they would go.
yeah. Yeah, I've talked to people who have that experience and have experienced that kind of activity their whole life, and that's exactly what they feel is going on. That these
Hmm.
spirits are coming to them to somehow get help. It's just an
Yeah,
interesting.
and if you think about it, I mean, the feeling of not being heard or not being seen, must just be terrible. So if they can be there and they see you in one aspect or another, and they're like, hey, 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 and you're just da, 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 doing whatever, that's got to be exasperating. And at some point, I think, you would probably do whatever you had to get attention or to get help.
Uh, Now let's jump back over to the remote viewing and your your training. You went through training, um, and throughout the training, you're given mostly practice targets,
Hmm.
right? Nothing
Hmm.
of significance, but something that you can absolutely uh, get positive feedback on those
Right.
targets, right? Um, what is the significance for somebody, especially for somebody who's training, the significance of getting verifiable targets versus some abstract target that you can't get positive feedback on?
Ingo himself, for various reasons, was adamant about instantaneous feedback during your training episode. So when you start, and the way Paul does it through basic, intermediate, and advanced training, when you start, you're starting out with just fundamental. Can you tune into whatever that target reference number is and just simply distinguish land, structure, or water, one from the other? So your first sessions, just plain stage one sessions, are a minute or 2 minutes long. You're nervous, you feel vulnerable, um, you're scared to fail, especially if you're trained with a Stargate member.
Mhm.
You're just like, ah. So when you get water, and then the monitor says site end, and then they show you the feedback image, and it's the ocean. it, the relief, the joy, the happiness, the excitement, the confidence is remarkable. So then you move towards stage two, stage three, then in intermediate, you mostly work on stage four and a preview of stage five. And then in advanced, you put it all together and then you work with stage six, the clay modeling. If you don't have that feedback and you can't see, so for instance, if I put blue and there's no blue at all in the feedback, I can remember the quality of blue. Maybe blue came in as a loud phrase, but let's say I put yellow and there's yellow. I remember, that yellow, that kind of was quiet. It was subtle. It just kind of slipped in there. So in retrospect, by using feedback, you're able to differentiate the sense or feeling of a correct perception from an incorrect one. And throughout all of Paul's training, each thing is a gradient teaching you how to deal with emotions. So, for instance, the first time you might get a session that has, potential for some emotion, and you see the feedback, you're like, oh, okay, that's why I felt, you know, combined or sad or what have you. So, feedback, in my opinion, is just irreplaceable.
It's the building blocks, and you're building to um, harder and more complex targets,
Yes.
but you're building the confidence to be able to pinpoint um, details of those targets, of those harder targets.
Yeah. I mean,
Uh,
that's a good way to put it. The other thing that Ingo put into the feedback process is if you got an incorrect perception, it's just not acknowledged. It's never pointed out, that's wrong. You got that wrong. There's no punishment for that. You go down and, let's say blue, yellow, hot. So blue, correct. There was no yellow, no mark. Hot, it was hot, correct. So those misses are just not acknowledged. You only get praise on that which you got correct.
yeah, that's good.
And so you're never afraid to get a wrong perception. You're going to get wrong perceptions. Trust me, it happens. So, sometimes more to some of us than others. But if you're afraid to get wrong perceptions, then you're just going to be hung up all the time on being right. The objectivity or the object, I'm sorry, is to simply let the whole process flow.
Excellent. Have you done any work on real world targets since you've graduated?
Yes. I was asked at one point by a young woman in Australia, Sandra Hilliard, who has a remote viewing operation to participate in a little online contest she was having. And I was like, I mean, my fear, phobia, public failure, like, no, I think I'd, rather take a bullet in the fleshy part of my leg. And she kept encouraging. As it turned out, I won the contest. And that, I mean, that broke me through. So shortly after that, she invited me to do operational sessions with her team, a couple of which were very successful, and a number of which I've never received feedback. So I honestly don't know how I did. That's because of non-disclosure, client privacy, law enforcement involvement, perhaps, where they're not so open about using, psychic abilities. And then once I graduated Paul's advanced course, Gail Husick, who has a very high quality remote viewing operation in the United States, auditioned me through some miracle. It's one of the best sessions I ever did. And she invited me to join her team. So I work with those two. And then there's another person I won't mention that I do occasional sessions for.
Without divulging any details or personal information, can you describe a significant remote viewing session that you've had, a real world session? That's like, for example, the really good set, the one you said by the miracle. Uh,
Yeah,
call it
well,
your best session.
actually, Gail did release that session for us to publicly put out there. The one that has the most substantiation, Paul's sister-in-law, Angela Thompson Smith. She was actually Paul's assistant and my very first monitor ever in the basic course. So she had put out an open call, hey, I need some remote viewers to do a project related to archaeology that was being featured on Gaia TV. And I signed up. I thought, okay, let's just see where this goes. It turned out 3 of my sketches were used on Gaia TV in the show and corresponded directly. And what it was looking at some strange building configurations of a culture. Oh, I'm not going to remember the name of the island, but uh, off of Italy. The When she contacted me and said, could the TV show use a couple of your sketches? I'm like, what? And when I finally saw the correspondence myself, and that's one of the parts that's hard to explain. When you get that kind of feedback, you yourself are stunned.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know how it happened. You're happy. I mean, more than once I've had tears, just like, how did this happen? How could, I have done this? But there it was. And then in this one sketch I did, it was a particularly, like, when I came to starting, it was like I had to draw it. And it was a rock wall with an opening, but an interesting big square block of rock on top of the door. I did a real clear drawing. And then when you looked at those structures, they were trying to understand, because they were very unique to the area and not very well understood. It was an identical sketch.
Mm.
Now, while I was sketching, I didn't see that. I didn't have a mental image of a door and look at it and try to sketch it. I just let my hand do the sketching.
Mm.
And like I say, when that happens, you're confounded yourself. So how? I can't say. It just happens.
Wow. You did a really good presentation on YouTube um, about the underground bases.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Now, I'm going to direct people to your YouTube channel to check that out because it's a very good, very informative um, presentation. But could you give us just a little primer, what it's about, and tell people how to find that YouTube presentation?
Sure. When you said direct them, I was going to say no pun intended, but the name of the channel is Direct Perception. Direct Perception. It's brand new. I intended to just put this one presentation out there. There was a good response, so I put a couple of other things. A brief synopsis of the underground base situation was personally for myself, in some other work I had been doing, I discovered some kind of a configuration of different structures distributed over the face of Earth that were somehow involved in generating a sound that is now known as the global hum. So you can search for the global hum or the worldwide hum and find information. And you'll find information all the way from completely nuts to scientific denial to everything in between. So that's fine. You'll make up your own mind about that. That stuck with me. And when I got studying deeper into remote viewing, I started finding these sessions that were, they were not official taskings, but they were taskings to test the remote viewers. So the first sessions were done in 1973, 72, 73. The next wave was done in 82 by one of the world's best remote viewers, Joe McMoneagle. Then the other sessions were done in 85 when they wanted to test the new controlled remote viewing students, which Paul Smith was one of, when they came out of Ingo's course. Those sessions, I believe the last one I'm aware of, there may still be some that are as of yet not declassified, was around 1988. Then a wave of new remote viewers, or I should say contemporary remote viewers, also have done. The correspondence over the course of 73 to 2020, it's uncanny. The types of beings, the types of technology, the locations, the descriptions originally from Joe McMoneagle included that these things were putting out very, very low frequency sounds. NASA just publicly acknowledged that there's this mysterious bubble of extremely low frequency around Earth, I believe all the way out to the Van Allen belt. There's many other correspondences, so I'll leave a little bit of that as a surprise. I firmly within myself believe that they're real. I understand that the feedback and the correspondence aren't proof, but there's a lot there. So for the person with an open mind or someone who has already made this consideration or had sensations or impact, they say about 2% of the people can hear this sound they call the hum. It might be worth, taking your time and looking through it.
So yeah, I recommend anybody that's interested in these underground bases to check out the channel Direct Perception on YouTube. Do you have a title for that that video?
Project 8200.
Okay.
It was officially the way they named their project. So it was the first project of 1982, and so it's called Project 8200.
Got it. I think I might have to go watch that one again because if if I'm not giving away too much of a spoiler, uh, what what's the UFO connection with that?
These bases, alleged bases, seem to have craft going in and out of them. One of the feedback that I consider very valuable, one of the bases is alleged to be at Mount Hayes, Alaska. Well, there's 2 TV shows, Missing in Alaska and the other one called the Alaska Triangle. They got some pretty substantial information, and one of them got some incredible video from 3 different cameras. They'd set up 4 trail cameras, and I believe one of them had failed, and they've got this thing just up and down all around Mount Hayes.
Wow. So there's definitely a connection between these underground bases that were remote viewed. But was it primarily the Stargate program that were doing these remote views, or was that by a different entity?
No, the first set of viewings was by Pat Price, who is still regarded as one of the best remote viewers. At that time, he was not using any protocol. This was the earliest days of SRI. So, best you could call it was generic remote viewing. Then, when Joe McMoneagle did it in 82, Stargate still had not been established and CRV itself had not been formulated. He used what would be called extended remote viewing, where he would get in a hypnagogic state known as, from the Monroe Institute, Monroe Level 10, body asleep, mind awake. And then he would have a monitor that he directed his intention to geographical coordinate. And then once there, in and around that coordinate. So extended remote viewing. Then, I think it was February of 85, Paul Smith and Bill Ray, two of Ingo's original students, were assigned on the same day, one at 8 in the morning, the other at 10 in the morning, to do a session on those. And again, the correspondence, the feedback, when you go through the forums we had for maybe 2 or 3 years while researching this, it's just really hard to ignore.
Yeah.
And it's a concept nobody in their right mind wants to believe it. I don't want alien underground bases on planet Earth. I don't want to be screwed with at night when I'm a child. I don't want any of that to be true. So for me, there's been a coming to grips with process now, and in part because of what I went through, I am dead set to the very end of my life, to my last breath, to see whatever this is exposed. And I don't give a hoot what the cost is to myself. I'm going to be some part of this disclosure effort. And disclosure is taking place from so many angles, on so many fronts, that all I want to do is put a drop in that bucket and fight to the very end. If in fact these are malicious, conscious beings inhibiting humanity, it needs to stop, and it needs to stop now.
That's a pretty bold statement, and hats off to you for that conviction.
I'm on a kamikaze run.
Uh, Now let's lighten up the mood just a little bit,
Okay.
and
It's not the first time we've been accused of being too serious. So
I agree. Yeah. Now I was watching an interview, or listened to an interview with Daz Smith, who's also a really well known, very prolific remote viewer. He's done some really interesting targets.
and a
Uh,
very, very good remote viewer.
Very good remote viewer.
Yeah,
Yes.
Daz was very gracious to be in my let's say awkward phase of growing up and mentored me on some things, and I have a lot of respect for him and his work.
Uh, I actually skipped the question, but I'll come back to that question. Remind me to ask you again about how you got to know all of these really well-known remote viewers. But I'll
Okay,
ask you that after this one,
I'll jot it
um,
down.
because with the interview I was listening to with Daz, he's done Roswell, Area 51, JFK. I mean, some of the most significant targets you could imagine. Um, what he said about that was that he had always wanted to do these kind of targets, but it took him decades to be tasked with somebody giving him those targets. Um, and the reason for that is because he's a very disciplined remote viewer. He follows the correct protocol and doesn't assign those, or he doesn't um, in any way try to influence the targets that he's receives,
Mm-hmm.
which is standard protocol for CRV. Um, First question regarding that
Can you
is,
do me one quick favor?
yeah.
Hold that question for 1 second. I planned poorly for a contingency being live and drinking coffee.
Oh, you need a break. Go
Give
ahead,
me
man.
just 2 seconds and I'll be right back
All
with
right.
you. Okay.
Sounds good. I'll see if anybody has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Thank you to those people that have given the uh, video a like, thumbs up,
Okay. Thank
and
you, Andrew.
thanks for tuning in. Yeah, okay. So the question that I have for you about Daz choosing to not front load himself uh, by trying to influence the targets that he's
Mhm.
received. What's the significance of that? I mean, what is the downside to having a front loaded session?
Let me go just a little bit of Daz. Daz was a natural psychic for many years. he just he discovered remote viewing, was trained, and found himself becoming very, very good. Daz has also heavily studied Ingo, the remote viewing archives, and is one of the best scientifically motivated remote viewers. So to him, being blind is like the law. It has to be blind to actually meet the criteria for remote viewing established back at Stanford Research Institute. The damage to remote viewing when you're front loaded, it can be managed. And I did take some courses in psychic detective work where it would emulate a police situation where they would give you a sketch and they would want to know, is this person alive or dead? Where are they? And your mind just becomes a million bits of imagination. And so once you train yourself away, it is possible to work front loaded, but it's not scientific protocol for remote viewing.
Mm-hmm.
Daz was very, very gracious to me as I was coming up. We've also had some long knockdown, drag out battles. I always walked away with learning, or he would push me to some resources. And now when he's not hosting his own Friday Zoom chat, I'll co-host or fill in. So he's very, very important to remote viewing and also to me.
So with that in mind, now, like I said, Daz had to wait. He had already had an interest in the UFO topic, and it took, I think he said, 22 years, or somewhere around that amount of time, for somebody to task him with an Area 51 or a Roswell target. Um, if you could put that out there into the ether of potential targets, what are your three top targets that you would want to remote view?
I'm not sure, about the chronology regarding Daz. as to when he first got esoteric targets. Um, I became familiar with Daz because of a esoteric target that he had done, where he was assigned specifically to the death event of JFK. But he started getting these impressions of JFK moving away from his body, and decided to go and follow that. And there's a video out there on that. And that's how I first became aware of Daz. For myself, this will sound contradictory given the other things we've talked about. I have precisely zero interest in esoteric targets. The If I've ever been tasked one, I don't know, because I haven't received feedback. There is just no interest for me. I'm also not interested in remote viewing the future, which might sound odd. I am more interested in what people call applied consciousness. If I can help you find your dog, or if you're lost, help somebody else find you, look at a possible solution to a scientific problem, which was what my first audition with Gail Husick was. I love that kind of stuff. I like the past. The past is there, and it's perceivable. The future, again, that is essentially not feedbackable. So even though I have all these weird experiences, I'm not interested in esoteric targets myself.
Okay. Then if somebody wanted to present you with a task or a target,
Hmm.
um, what sort of protocol should they apply to submit a target for you to remote view?
Just send me 8 numbers.
Okay, there is I know that a lot of remote viewers have a real inhibition to taking targets, accepting targets from people, just random targets from
Hmm.
people, because of the implications. Sometimes people will task a remote viewer with um, finding a lost loved one, and that could
Hmm.
result in a really traumatic experience for the remote viewer.
Hmm.
Are there any hesitations for you in that regard?
For me, no. Paul takes you through the stages of what's called aesthetic impact. In other words, your emotions about what you're viewing. I have felt that, but he does it on a gradient. I had one session that involved a World War II incident, and I cried, and it took 4 or 5 minutes to get that feeling, that grief, uh, out of my system from what I was perceiving. And in the end, the feedback proved it to be a very accurate session. So when you're trained, if you don't expect it, and I could tell you several stories. Let me pick one that would be useful here. Okay. A friend and I, uh, actually, our housemate, is an incredible remote viewer. She's also very sensitive. And, I used to tease her about being a bliss bunny. Okay. But her remote viewing is incredible. So we decided to do a session, the same target, each of us doing individual session blind. And I was having some discomfort. Then I kind of just, worked it out the way you're supposed to, take a aesthetic impact break until those emotions dissolve, and then you can proceed on. If you let the emotions stay in place, they're going to become filters. If I'm remote viewing a coiled rope, and my first perception is that it's a snake, and I don't like snakes, the rest of my session is going to be altered by my fear of snakes, not by the rope or a real snake or anything. So you want to be careful to do that. So I did what I was trained and worked through, and I was getting a lot of perceptions of bodies and war and explosions and this kind of thing. When she was done, we compared our sessions. Her session was beautiful, shiny, sparkly, rainbow unicorn kind of things. Then we looked at the feedback, and it was a historical war event. Her mind just flat out didn't want to see it and put something there. Later, she started to get a headache, feel uncomfortable, had some, ugly flashes of image. So what her preconscious tried to repress did start to come up later. I hadn't seen that to that degree, so I actually called Paul and said, "This is what's going on," and then he helped us through the resolution. So anybody who thinks that this is just it's not like that. Training is important, and I'm not promoting just one type of training. There's a variety of instructors, there's several modalities. The responsible ones who have track records and student testimonials that put these kind of intelligent safety notices in their training, go to one of those. Paul wrote a blog article called Beware the Unknown Tasker. And we actually have that as an announcement on our Facebook group, which is Remote Viewing / Remote Perception. It's right there in the announcements. A lot of people just, hey, well, let me task you on, the devil. Let me task you on something. And I don't know if they understand, especially with a sensitive viewer who is perceptive, but isn't, they want to hold back the perceptions. What you resist in a certain sense comes forward. Lynn Buchanan himself tells a story of an event he reviewed that like literally took him, I think, something like a year and a half before he realized how that event was affecting him, came up with a process to resolve it, and then he teaches that. Anybody taking this and treating it as a toy, in my opinion, is making a mistake.
So, with that in mind, you are still open to receiving targets from pretty much anybody?
No, not me.
No, that's what I was asking you. I was asking
Oh,
you
okay.
specifically, how
I
could
will.
somebody submit a
I will.
target to you?
Well, first of all, my accuracy rate at this stage of my growth, I wouldn't be offering anything like, hey, I think this is going to be accurate. I just am not at that point. Being an advanced remote viewer means I fully understand the structure, but I have a long way to go.
Hmm.
The only people I'll take tasking from are people I know that are highly trained, highly responsible, and people that I trust. So obviously, I take taskings from Sandra, from Gail. I would take, I took all the homework taskings from Paul. I would take a tasking. Daz actually put me through some taskings to help me train. I would take a tasking from Daz and a couple of others out there, but I'm not taking random taskings from anybody for any reason. One, for the possible dangers, and two, I'm not going to oversell my abilities as an individual remote viewer. Once in a while I land a really nice session. Once in a while I you know turn in a train wreck. And generally, yeah, I'm slowly but surely getting more consistent over time. So even the people that do task me, they understand. They look at me, they're giving me a chance to grow, and they're saying, okay, there's some bits and pieces here, I might be filling in for them, but a lot of the viewers they have are much better than myself.
Okay, so for a listener or somebody who has an idea about a target, what protocol should they go through to submit a target to a remote viewer? I mean, is there a process that somebody could have a target remote viewed uh, by a remote viewer? And I mean, somebody who's been trained.
Sure. If you would have to go to a professional project manager, and they're going to look at this. They're going to judge it by a number of criteria. What is the person up to? What are they hoping to achieve? Will they take action on the data? There's a list of criteria that a professional project manager will use to decide if they're even going to take that project.
Mm-hmm.
Then they might organize the tasking and then give it to another person in their organization who is also blind. Just give them the number, and then that person might give the number to the remote viewer. So, in that sense, it's double blind. If you're working with people and just wanting to train each other, you could pre-agree with someone and say, don't task me on death, don't task me on war, don't task me on the devil, don't task me on aliens. And then they can do it however they want.
Mm-hmm.
There's ways out there to find out. There's a lot of important elements to how you word a tasking as well. You could misword something, and by description, the preconscious tends to be very literal. So if you, as an example, one I remember said, what was the score of the last, Miami Dolphins football game? Uh, is there still Miami Dolphins?
I don't watch football.
Okay, I'll go with Seattle Seahawks because I know.
Okay.
So, what was the score of the last? Now, what do you mean by last? Last meaning previous or final? Is it the very last game they ever play in history, or is it the game that they most recently played?
Okay.
There's nuances there.
Yeah.
There's also there's the tasker's intent. If a tasker has a really clear intention and isn't overlaying a bunch of their own beliefs right out of the gate, you get a good, healthy, clean tasking. All of this stuff takes training, but there are fun ways to do it. But I would consult with other people. Mine isn't the only opinion. Do it fun, do it safe. That's really all I would tell people.
Okay. So we're getting some questions from the chat room.
Okay.
And I just would really like to say thank you to everybody that submitted those questions, and thank you for tuning in. Um, has anyone put together a database of all the remote viewers uh, regarding alien bases, alien encounters, etc.? I think that the first place to start would be with the presentation that you made about the underground bases.
Yes, I did not in the process make a database. There are partial databases. The first person that put a presentation on this together is Skip Atwater, also known as Skip Fred Atwater. He was the one that received the papers in 1982 from Hal Puthoff and was the monitor for Joe McMoneagle's first session, the ERV session. On Amazon, you can go and there's a DVD called Project 8200, The Untold Story. Now, in that, he talks about his old website having some of the resources. I was able to access those resources. There's others that have looked at this topic. Most of the information I got was out of the declassified CIA database, but that takes some nuances. You could put in unknown structure training and find a few of them, and then you can start to follow the leads and get some more. That probably is the best starting point I could give to you. If you take bits and pieces from the presentation I did, take some of the names and that kind of thing, and do searches, you could probably bring some of it up.
Okay. This question is also from Mike S. Has anyone put together a respected, certified tasking organization? Excellent question.
Hmm.
And this goes back to what I was asking you. What protocols would somebody follow in submitting a target?
No,
Um,
no, that's a great idea. And, if somebody did create that kind of a resource, that could be very, very useful. How you would go about that, you would just want to talk to the most experienced people with tasking. So when I took Paul's operational course, tasking was a good portion of that. You could talk to other popular remote viewers who task. Brett Stewart, he does taskings. Daz does taskings. The other Stargate or historically experienced remote viewers, you just want to go to them because the background they've been through, that's going to be a resource. Lori Williams, as an example, she has a book out there on monitoring that you can get on YouTube. And I believe there's a couple of mentions in there, but it talks about how do you monitor another remote viewer without leading them or even giving little subtle signals. That's a useful resource on that topic, and in a way is indirectly connected to tasking.
yeah, good suggestion, Mike. And thank you for the question. How concerned, also from Mike S., how concerned is Russell about telepathic overlay in your remote viewing results?
In my remote viewing results, I don't worry about it. If it's there, it's there.
So I understand the question, but for anybody who doesn't really understand what telepathic overlay, can you just give a brief
Yes,
description of what that is?
telepathic overlay was a phenomena they found clear back at SRI, where let's say that I know what the target is and I create a tasking and I have beliefs. I believe this is what the target is, or that is what the target is in a broader context. Somehow, and when they did the research, they brought in hypnotists and numerous other people to examine this phenomena and discovered that basically the authority or the power position of the tasker kind of in a way lends itself to the viewer making themselves a little bit subservient to the tasker. And telepathically, they pick up on what the tasker wants, what the tasker believes, what the tasker expects, and they will literally put that into their session and not just the straight facts. So, one of the cures that they began to employ was to put the viewer in charge. The viewer's in charge. The session is yours. The monitor is effectively your assistant, not your lord and overseer. When I work myself, I'm just going to take whatever impressions I get. I'm not going to say, is this the tasker's telepathy? Is this the real sight? Is this my own imagination? I do, especially when I'm working with professional projects, I will write out, spend 2 or 3 minutes kind of as a cool down, get my mind relaxed. I will write out my intention. Basically, please let this session be helpful to somebody. Let my session contribute something that the project manager needs to know or the client needs to know to solve the problem. So I'll really clarify my intention in writing before I start the session. If you have a good tasker who isn't allowing themselves to have a head full of stuff while they're creating the tasking, that puts clarity on that end. But if you are crystal clear on your end about what you want the outcome to be, you might, even if they had some stuff, you might just go straight through that to the target.
Thanks for those questions, Mike. These are great questions too. Mortal Mirror asked if you had already covered UFO experiences, your own UFO experiences. Yes.
I,
Um,
I did in part. Do you want me to respond to that?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Are there other UFO experiences that you'd like to?
Well, the ones that I mentioned weren't UFO proper. I mean, they were perceived being and what appeared to be abduction experiences. As far as an actual UFO, I've had one, and that took place in 2002 when I lived in Wyoming. I lived in a very small community in what was known as Wapiti Valley, that's between Cody, Wyoming, and the East Gate of Yellowstone. And in that little place, it's a bowl of rocks and mountains. If a Harley came through during the summer, a summer night, it felt like thunder. That's how echoey and reverberating the environment was in regard to sound. I came home one night from a photography assignment, presumably 2, 3 in the morning. It was at the Buffalo Bill Historical Center, a big social event. And when I pulled into my driveway, I looked up. I was like, "What the?" And again, this is a hard thing to describe. This thing, whatever it was, folded out of something or somewhere into our space. It had no defined boundary. It was just a pristine white light, and it was hovering about. It's hard to say, half a mile to a mile away. And I rolled down my truck window, and there was zero sound. The only type of aircraft we ever saw there was Forest Service helicopters if there was a brush fire or lightning strike fire, that kind of thing. So I sat there, and then I positioned myself with my head against my back seat, and then I took that little oil reminder sticker in the frame of my truck window and put it there. And that thing did not move for a minute. The whole encounter overall lasted about 7 minutes. So I just like, "Ugh, I don't care." So I fired up the truck, turned out, went down this little dirt road, hit the main highway till this thing is right up there, quarter mile. And I said, "I'm determined. I don't care. I just want to find out what this is." And then it just folded out. Just, that was it. And when I got back to my house, I was frustrated. And then it dawned on me, I'm a photographer. And for this entire event, I had my entire camera bag, camera and everything sitting right next to me in my truck. And it never occurred to me once to take it out and take a picture, which I found a little bit odd, just, because if it moved, I photographed it. And that event is the first time I believed in UFOs. I'd had plenty of other interesting experiences that we talked about at the very front end of the talk here. And that was when I, in full mode, started studying UFOs. And that came through, I ordered like Val Valerian's Matrix books. I think they were Matrix 1, 2, and 3. And I just had to, I can't deny there was no other possible explanation. And I'm a logical person, even though I, sound nutty at times. I examine these things, I pay attention to them, and I put my heart into try, is this real or not? And that was real. That was undeniable. And literally the next day is when I started ordering books.
Is that the only time that
That's
you've
the
seen a UFO?
only optical, uh, physical craft type situation. I've never seen anything else that I said, "Hey, was that a UFO?" or that kind of thing. Just that one time.
Cool. Cool experience. I've never even seen that much. Never even seen a dashing light through the sky.
Mm-hmm.
Um, let me get caught up on these questions here because
Sure.
there's quite a few. There was a good one. Oh, uh, Pontiac's progeny asks, has anyone that you know of ever remote viewed Skinwalker Ranch?
I have heard of that, but I literally can't think of a specific session
I
off
don't
the
know.
top of my head.
Yeah, I don't know anybody personally, but I do know that they have worked with remote viewers on Skinwalker Ranch, though I don't know what the results were.
Right, and that would not surprise me at all, given that Hal Puthoff was on the on the board of
Absolutely.
that NIDS team.
Yeah.
That he, being a co-creator of remote viewing, wouldn't have done that would surprise me. I don't know who would have done it or where those sessions were. I will say, if you're not familiar with it, George Knapp just released 2 hours of interview with Robert Bigelow on his Mystery Wire, I believe it is, YouTube. That Bigelow spills the beans, and he tells us stories of multiple events, some of which I had been told before, but this like confirmed. And then later, I attended a George Knapp Q&A, and he actually took it one level further.
Yeah. That was
So,
something, wasn't it?
oh, it was, and
That presentation with George Knapp.
I'm indebted to you for that invitation. That wow. So,
Yeah.
if you're looking for information that I would consider, reliable, I would look up the George Knapp, Robert Bigelow interviews. I believe it's where Robert Bigelow, according to people that are familiar with him, has said more than he's ever said before.
Yeah. And I would be under the impression that any remote viewing sessions that have been done out there are under NDAs, and that stuff is kept pretty close to the vest.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but yeah, that's a great question. Um, Shoot, this thing jumped on me. But if I skip your question, um, I appreciate you guys putting the questions in there. Uh, just repost it down below, um, and I'll get to it afterwards. Have you experienced any strange phenomena while remote viewing? That's Pontiac Progeny.
Yeah. One thing that I mean, it depends how you define strange. Um, but one that seemed very odd, and I don't know how to explain it. I was remote viewing a natural geological formation in a native type desert land. And I was just going along with my stage two. And as if from, say, 3 feet to my right and a foot behind me, literally something, and not in an audible voice, but in one of those, voices uh, that you perceive in your head, so to speak, it's just like angry.
Hmm.
So I'm like, ah. So the look on my face, and then the monitor I was working with said, what was that? Because I wasn't about to write anything down. And I said, well, since you've asked, somebody just appears to have yelled the word angry at me from over there. And they said, okay, write down AOL angry. Okay, AOL break angry. Then a few more perceptions later, angry. And that was it. It didn't occur again, but it was starkly unique to any other perceptions. And how to explain it, I honestly can't say.
Yeah, that's wild. And you're
Oh, and I
probably
take,
going to get more of that as time goes on,
yeah,
don't
I
you
don't know,
think?
but I take it back. There was one other thing now that I just thought about was the earlier session we mentioned, the archaeology one. I had, and even drew a face. I had a distinct sense of not necessarily evil, but a dominating presence, a protective presence, if you will, over these kind of mystical, religious, archaeological sites. And I do remember now putting that in the session, actually drawing a face and describing, kind of an intimidating figure.
Uh, Now I had briefly mentioned that I wanted to ask you about your connections
Mm-hmm.
within the remote viewing community and how, I mean, the last session that you guys did, where you brought together And you almost created a Stargate reunion
Hmm.
with all those Stargate remote viewers
Yeah.
in that one location. That was fantastic. But my own assumption is that it's because you know all those guys personally and you were able to pull them together. Is that true?
Partially. The first of all, the opportunity was created by Daz. The way I knew Bill Ray was in the very first class, instructed by Ingo with Paul Smith. So for intermediate and advanced training, Paul brought Bill to be the assistant instructor. Paul keeps a instructor to student ratio of 2 to 1. So he always has one instructor per 2 students. I met Bill there, worked with him, for 5.5 days and 5.5 days, and came to greatly, greatly admire him. So I talked to him, and he said that would be okay. He'd be interested in doing it. So Dad started to set that up. Then naturally, Paul wanted to be there. The two of them, I call it the Paul and Bill show. They tell stories on each other from back in the day, and it's quite fun. Then I had, again, through Paul, been briefly introduced on a specific topic to Tom McNear, who I also admire. And he was Ingo Swan's first student and the only military student trained through all 6 stages of CRV. He spent 3 years with Ingo learning. So that one I would call an acquaintance, and probably more like Tom just kind of puts up with me. The key, I guess, to those connections is ultimately all of their generosity.
Well, and then Lynn Buchanan popped in,
Yes,
and how did he know about it?
that was through a generic invitation, I guess, or maybe one of the other guys let him know. I just put the invitation out, having communication with Paul fairly frequently. That was automatic, and then I just kind of lightly said, "Oh, I'm just going to send an email to Tom and see what happens." So that's how that particular event came together.
Yeah, that was an awesome event, and it went over 3 hours, and those guys took almost every question that was submitted.
I read every question out of the chat that was submitted, consolidated a couple, and then one person had 3 or 4, and I was running short on time, so I might have missed 1 or 2 of theirs, but I picked their important ones. So they did. They responded, and then they would say, "Okay, Tom, how do you remember that? How do you remember it, Paul? Lynn, what are you thinking?" So you got 4 original Stargate team members, and they answered a couple of tough questions. So yeah, it was, I mean, to me, look, I was as surprised as anybody the way that went. Generally, the connections one makes in the remote viewing world is based on the generosity of the people still spending their life and time. They'll answer questions. So pretty much, I made myself a little bit persistent and annoying, and then they became aware of me, and then maybe say, "Oh, he's not that bad of a guy." And then friendships, and like I said, they've each taken time to mentor, to help. So the community is just that way. It's like with me now. If somebody has a basic question or something that I can answer, okay, I wasn't a Stargate member, but I love to do it, especially if someone's like, "Oh, this is so exciting," and the only way to do it is just persist and make yourself known. And if you get too annoying, trust me, people will tell you.
And I've found that to be true as well in my pursuit to interview and talk to people on my podcast. If you want to go after those high profile people, they're just busy all the time. It's not that they're ignoring you or they don't want to talk to you. It's just a matter of you being persistent enough to get a response from them.
Mhm.
That's a great comment. A couple more questions and then we'll wrap this up and
Okay.
call it a night. Okay. I
Yeah.
appreciate you being here for the duration, man. We've been at this like a little bit over 90 minutes.
Oh, this is great. I'm so happy to have met you in the first place and to be invited to do this and to be your guinea pig for doing live.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's actually my second round at doing it live. The first one we didn't do any promotion on it, so it was
Okay.
just me and a few other podcasters that I know real well. But this is the first live interview type of session that I've done, or episode, I should
Well, it's
say.
my first live, and I will make alternative coffee plans next time.
It's awesome, man, because we've got people actually tuning in and putting up questions, and it's fun. I'm having a great time.
Mhm.
So I just want to let people know. Okay, so first of all, repeat your YouTube channel so that people could go check out the underground bases, and then the other video that you did with the Stargate team, Stargate members.
Is it's direct perception, and you'll recognize that I have a little bullseye with an arrow,
Yeah,
just called direct perception.
and then are there any upcoming uh, meetings? And you do these meetings on Zoom, but are there any upcoming meetings or um,
Oh yeah,
events that you want to let people know about that are coming up soon?
yeah. This Friday I'll be hosting an open Ask Anybody Anything, so people can ask Daz, other remote viewers. So all I'm going to do is basically kind of loosely oversee it, record it. Then that will go to Daz's YouTube channel, Remote Viewed, one word, capital R, capital V, Remote Viewed. And he has a whole history of the ones we've had. Daz coming up has spectacular guests, like interesting guests. He'll have Ingo Swan's niece, Ellie, who manages the trust and who is the one who's been very gracious to put Ingo's work out, publish unpublished materials. He's going to have her. He is going to have Pam Coronado, John Cook, the president of IRVA, Gail Husick, a gentleman whose name, he's from France, Alex Champion, if I'm saying it correctly, who runs a very well-known high-profile remote viewing agency in Europe. So he's got people stacked for, because it's going to alternate. So all hosts just, hang out, chit chat. And then every other Friday, Daz will be hosting this spectacular remote viewing guest list.
And if people wanted to keep up on that stuff, the best place to go is the Facebook page.
If you go to, well, yeah, uh, if you go to my YouTube channel, Direct Perception, you'll see under my links, you'll see remote viewed, or you could just enter remote viewed Daz Smith into YouTube and find all of the archived Friday Zoom chats that he's done.
Okay. So, but if somebody wanted to join the YouTube channel, what how would they? I mean, the Facebook channel, Facebook page, or Facebook group,
Okay.
where you guys post all of these events that are coming up.
Well,
How would they get to that?
the Facebook group that Paul Smith started, I'm an admin in. He has unique features there. He publishes safe uh, learning gradient targets, has a project called the Target Vault. When you go to the Target Vault page, he gives anybody just a brief um, tutorial without having to go through all the pain of learning structure and everything else on just how to do a fun first time spontaneous session, and then has a supply of targets, time permitting. He's very busy, but time permitting in that group, he will give feedback. So someone who's brand new, never paid, put a penny, didn't have to buy anything, can post their session, which I admire the brave souls that do that, post their session, and Paul Smith will sit there and say, hey, you got these impressions, maybe, you went a little bit off. So that's a nice thing. And that group is called Remote Viewing / Remote Perception.
Got it. Cool. And um, it, I I've seen you guys posting these these events for the YouTube channel as
Mm-hmm,
well
mm-hmm.
on there.
Yeah, they'll always, all of Daz's events will get posted Daz makes these really nice, big, colorful banners. In fact, all the guests that I've mentioned, those are already posted in our group.
Okay.
And you can schedule the dates in advance because I think he's like 6 weeks out, maybe something like
Oh,
that.
okay, cool.
And can I do one little personal thing here?
Yeah, absolutely. I was gonna ask you how do you want people to reach out to you directly if that's
I
possible.
don't. That becomes unfortunately kind of a rough go. You get, let's just say, some unusual emails, different things. So I don't want to deal with that. I want to keep the whole thing as sane and clear. So the place to find me is in that group. You can see the direct perception. I just don't go down too many rabbit holes. And that's said with ultimate respect, and I appreciate everybody. It just becomes complex and very, very time consuming.
Mhm. Okay, and what was it? Was there anything else that you wanted to say?
Yeah, I don't know if he made it, but one of the members of a group, good friend of mine, David Powell. If you're out there, David's in Florida hospital recovering from back surgery. So I want to wish you quick and speedy healing, and I appreciate our friendship and
Yes,
wish you the best.
very good thoughts. Good thoughts and prayers out to David.
Rise and walk, my friend.
Yes. Well, I think that's a good place to close this out. And let me check the questions one more time, see if there's anything else that I missed. Where can we listen to the Zoom chat with the Stargate members? That would be over on the Direct Perception YouTube channel.
Yeah, that's and then also Daz uploaded both because we split it into two halves because it was 3 hours. So you
Okay,
can find that on Daz Smith's Remote Viewed, or you can find that on my Direct Perception.
very good. And Catherine DeBard said Paul's target vault is for those wishing to practice remote viewing, and you did touch on that.
Mhm.
Uh, Thanks for
And
mentioning
I
that,
I
Catherine.
actually indirectly mentioned Catherine. She happens to be the person I mentioned who's an incredible natural remote viewer. And actually, if it weren't for her, I probably would have never dedicated myself to the study. Just in a short story, my product, as I mentioned, was marginal. I could look at it and say, maybe it worked, maybe it didn't. But for me, it wasn't enough. Then Catherine took the DVDs and things on her own and started putting out this product. And I'm like, well, no, 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 you're not supposed to trace the feedback photo. You know, well, no, I didn't. I didn't look at it till, and I'm like, no, like, I remember the first one I saw was the feedback photo was a roller coaster with four people in it coming down off that a big fancy thing in Las Vegas. I can't remember what it's called. And her drawing was that exactly. So then it was like two or three more, and there's just no way. So I created some targets, locked them in the safe back of my office, say 8, 9 miles away. Came home with just the numbers, gave them to her, knowing that I was the only one in the world, and she did it again. And so for me, you'll see where on my Facebook page, there's my little testimonial about how I discovered remote viewing and got hooked on it. And I tell that story. It's still emotional. It was the first time ever. Everything I couldn't question, believed in, hoped was true, what have you. It was the first time I'd ever seen anything that was trainable, repeatable, and verifiable. And her work and that undeniable. It's just like, wow,
Hmm,
life is more. And so Catherine is really important to me that way.
cool. Good good story. Thanks for sharing that.
Mhm.
And Pontiac progeny suggested that I interview Catherine.
You
Well, the
might.
invitation is out there for Catherine to come on Dead Hand Radio in a future episode.
I can guarantee you she's one heck of a lot more pleasant to look at. So,
Well, the invitation is definitely out there. She's welcome
okay.
to come on, and if she wants you by her side to for moral encouragement, we could have both of you on?
She doesn't need me by her side.
Okay. Cool.
She's my girlfriend's very best friend now. I'm, I think, approaching 40 years.
Wow. Cool.
Um, and she's, like I said, she's our housemate. But yeah, she can more than handle her own. And, you know, normally it's me that's hiding down in the basement. So,
Very cool. Then with that, Russell, is there anything else you would like to say before we
well, I'd like
close
to
this out?
say thank you to the people who showed up. Thank you for the questions. It was fun. I didn't get to see them the same way Andrew did, but thank you. And Andrew, thank you. I'm really happy we met, and I'm glad this seems to have gone well.
Yeah, it does seem to have gone well, and I appreciate you being here, Russell, and for all the people who joined us in the chat room and um, who watched the live uh, broadcast. I appreciate you guys all being here. And with that, we'll call it a night.
Okay.